Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. I'm looking forward to the next couple of months and getting back into the swing of things with this podcast. I want to thank you guys, the listeners, for all of the support that you've given my podcast over the years. It's hard to believe that I started this in February of 2015. It's been a great journey, and I look forward to getting more information to you guys. I want to thank the sponsors of this podcast. I want to thank GoHunt.com and remind you guys that the Black Friday sale actually is starting early on November 12th. There's tons of great gear that's 60% off at the Go Hunt Gear Shop. Go to GoHunt.com. Also, remember, with this Black Friday sale, when you sign up for Insider, you're going to get $100 off to spend at the Go Hunt Gear Shop. That's just when you sign up for Insider. If you want the Explorer, you get $50 to spend in the Go Hunt Gear Shop. Go to GoHunt.com. Use the J. Scott promo code. Guys, I want to thank Go Hunt for their sponsorship. I want to thank you guys for supporting Go Hunt. They've been a loyal supporter of mine from the beginning, so go check them out. I also want to thank Coues.com. Coues is the ultralight hunting gear that I've been wearing since 2010. Great ultralight hunting gear. They've got 3 camo patterns from the Velo to the Verde to the Vias. They've got packs. They've got all sorts of great lightweight gear. Go to Coues.com to order. It's a direct-to-consumer website. You can go to Coues.com to order the gear there. I also want to thank Phonescope.com. Use the JScott23 promo code for a 10% discount. Phonescope is the digiscoping device that I use on my iPhone to capture some of the videos and photos that you see on my Instagram account. And then I'd also like to thank Lathrop & Sons and remind you that they're doing a Mountain Hunter boot giveaway and a custom Synergy footbed giveaway. All you have to do to enter is go to lathropsons.com, click on the link there to enter into the giveaway, and you can be entered into that drawing. Give James and Steven a call if you want to discuss and talk to them about their 3 boots. They basically have the Encompass, the Mountain Hunter, and the Elite boot, plus their custom Synergy footbeds. I've been wearing them now for over a year and just absolutely love their boots. There's 2 ways to get hold of them: boots at lathropsons.com, or you can call them directly. Call James, call Steven directly. They're 2 brothers. 618-544-8782. Guys, let's get right to these episodes. If you'd like to send me a message, you can go to my Instagram account, which is at jscottoutdoors. You can send me an email, jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. God bless, and thanks for your support. Devin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
That's awesome, buddy. I had to give you a little bit of a plug there, going to U of A, being an ASU grad myself. I've got family members that went to U of A and other family members that went to ASU, and it's always a great rivalry, sometimes more heated than some during football season, but
Right.
Always nice. Anybody from the state of Arizona, in my mind, is a good person. So I'm glad to have you on the show today, and look forward to talking to you and picking your brain a little bit about Coues deer.
For sure.
Devin, why don't you give me a little bit of a background on your love for Coues deer and maybe when you started hunting them and when you knew the passion for Coues deer, burned through your veins.
Growing up, my dad is a big-time mule deer fanatic. I grew up in St. John's, Arizona, north of Springerville there. And I guess my first taste of Coues deer, I think I was in 8th grade, and my dad and I drew a 27 late Coues deer hunt. I shot like a 65, 70-inch buck on that hunt, and but my passion really didn't start until I moved down to Tucson to go to college, and did a couple years of some heavy-duty school, and then I actually put in for Unit 33 and drew a late trophy hunt there in 33, and that's really where it kind of started. Went out on a couple scouting trips and just was blown away by the numbers of deer that I could see down there versus hunting mule deer up around St. John's and the Unit 2s and stuff. You know, we go weeks at a time without even seeing a deer up there. So that's kind of when my I guess I got bit by the Coues deer bug was on that trophy hunt while I was in college, and ever since then, that's all I can really think about.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know once you get bitten by the Coues deer bug, it's something for me that I find myself, even in the off season, just thinking about, this buck or that buck, or, thinking about a certain area that I want to go into. And, my wife will say, "What are you thinking about?" And then she just smiles and shakes her head and walks off because she knows I'm dreaming about some big Coues buck or thinking about some hunt that I'd been on. And it's funny running into different Coues deer hunters. It seems like we all have that same passion. And hunters in general, I think, whether it's Coues deer, mule deer, elk, whatever, sheep, whatever you're passionate about. Tell me a little bit about this 126-inch 3x3 with eye guards that you shot, when it was, and maybe some of the details of the buck. Just a gorgeous buck.
I killed that buck in 2012. I found him the same year that I killed him, so I don't have a ton of history of him. I found him when he was just starting to grow there, and kept tabs on him for a couple months. I did try and shoot him with my bow. I actually missed him twice with my bow. Was probably
out of a tree stand, Devin, or spot and stock?
Spot and stalking him. First shot was a little bit of a long poke, 72 yards, I think, and he was broadside, didn't know I was there, calm as could be, and he string jumped on me. I missed him by maybe an inch over the top of his back. And second shot was a chip shot, like 38 yards, and I clipped a little branch, and I don't really know what happened on that one.
So you actually had a rifle tag that year, but the way Arizona works is we can actually hunt with a bow as long as your rifle hunt hasn't come and you haven't harvested. So you tried to shoot them, obviously, with the velvet on, and then you ended up having a rifle tag a couple months later?
I did, yeah.
And tell me about the transition from his summer grounds to winter grounds, or if he stayed fairly local, maybe tell me about how you were feeling from the time you missed him and then having to wait until your rifle season was there. Did you go in and penetrate his country, or did you leave him alone, or give me kind of the background on that?
Well, I guess it all started when I found him. I actually hung a motion camera in a saddle, early on in the season, and I only got, I think, 2 different sets of pictures of him on there, real early when he was just nubbing out, and then another photo when he was developing pretty good, and I knew from the get-go he was going to be one of the biggest bucks I'd ever seen. So I basically just started bisecting or separating out the chunk of country in there, and just, by process of elimination, started checking stuff off where I didn't see him until I eventually found him about a mile or so away from where I got those pictures of him on that camera. And after I actually laid eyes on him, he lived right there within, I would say, 500 yard by 500 yard, this one little knob. He was on there day, night, every day, all the time. Never moved from there ever.
So before you go any further, you first saw him with the trail camera, and they must have been random pictures from him maybe going to water or just a moving pattern, but then you could almost throw a blanket around a 500-yard square from then on once you actually found him. What caused him to be in that saddle to get those photos taken of? What is your speculation of those photos? And then talk to me a little bit about watching him in that small area.
This has been a subject of mine that I've really been trying to figure out is why I originally got those pictures of him down there. If, while I was watching him over the course of a couple months, he never went down there that I know of. Of course, I wasn't watching him every single day, but, he was always on that knob somewhere. Over the last bit of a while running motion cameras, I find more often than not when these bucks are in velvet and growing, they tend to go for weird random walks, and I can't figure it out yet. I don't know what it is. I got another buck that I was watching the last couple years. The first time I got a picture of him was 2 miles from where he ended up, kind of where I considered his home range. I got pictures of him 2 miles away from there. And other bucks, I don't seem to notice that they go on those walks. It's kind of I don't know, in my little hunting group of guys, we just say they go for walks, random walks when they're in that early velvet stage growing.
It's funny you mention that. I don't run a lot of trail cameras. Actually, I don't run any trail cameras, but I do have buddies that do, and I have heard them also talk about these walkabouts. And what's interesting is a lot of these walkabouts tend to be some of these bigger bucks. And I remember some other buddies of mine that run quite a bit of cameras, and they talk about bucks that, are very, very patternable, very, very habitual, and then all of a sudden they go on a walkabout and they're gone for, a week or so, and then all of a sudden they're right back in there. So, maybe it's a mystery we'll never find out. So recapping what you said, you first got picture of this 126-inch buck when he was just nubbing out. What was it about him that you knew he was a giant? Was he wide, or what was it with his characteristic that you just could tell he was going to be a big buck?
Just a couple factors is his body size. He was a huge bodied buck, one of the biggest bodied bucks I've ever had my hands on. Just a giant chest. His back hips looked real small, and a big head on him, and just had mass, had some spread going. The points were real heavy coming off, and you could just tell that he was going to be something special, even early on, as early as that was.
Were you able to, after you shot him, were you able to age him at all, or guess his age? And do you think he was an old buck, or do you think he just had super genetics and was just the, Shaquille O'Neal of Coues deer and just had everything going on in the right spots?
My father actually sent one of his teeth away, and we got him aged, came back that he was 5 years old.
So, not an old buck, no, by any means. So, obviously, super genetics and just, the anomaly of Coues deer. Mm-hmm. Devin, in your experience, how much do you think, do you think that there's some bucks that will never be 100 inches, and then all of a sudden you'll just have one that just everything lines up, and, by the time he's a 3-year-old, he's a, 105-inch deer? How much of that do you think plays in there?
I do. There's the superior genetic deer, and there's deer that are, always going to be a 70-inch 2-point. It just, I've got multiple deer that we've watched year in and year out, and we see them over and over and over and over again. And, I've had deer that had the makings that I thought, they got good eye guards, good G2s, good main beam, good G3s, and you look at them, you go, man, I can't wait to see what that deer looks like next year. And then they get to a certain point and they just stop.
Meaning that, say they turn, they're into 100-inch, and you're thinking, well, if I just let him go, what will he be next year? You'll think he'll be 107, and then you let him go, and you think, oh, he's going to blow up 114, 115, but he just stays that, 105, 106-inch. He never goes ahead and blows up. You see that quite a bit.
I do, yep.
Yeah.
Multiple instances of that happening where, you got 100, 105. It looks good. He's got good points, and you think, man, next year, what is that thing going to be? And go back and look at him, and he's almost identical. And then for 2 or 3 years, he kind of stays that same size. So there's definitely bucks that are, stuck in a mold, and that's what they're going to be. And there's other bucks that, could put on 5, 10, 30 inches. You just never know.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you've missed him a couple times in the velvet archery. Now you're keeping an eye on the buck. He's staying in a small, tight area. He's on the same knob. How many times did you have visual of the buck between, say, the end of the archery season and before you shot him? How many times did you actually see him?
Ooh, I don't even know. I can't. I didn't ever keep track.
10, 20, 30 times?
Well, August, September, the end of August, beginning of September was when I missed him with my bow. And I actually had to go I had booked a moose hunt for my wife, so we had to leave with a week left of the archery season. And came back and went in there and found him. So 2 months of looking, 2 or 3 times a week, I was up there looking for him, and I saw him just about every time. So quite a bit of time I spent watching him.
And then the tag that you had drawn, which season did you draw, Devin?
I had the early October hunt.
Talk to me a little bit about the different seasons, and I'm betting that you're probably a proponent of those early seasons for a guy like you that has a bunch of time to scout. Talk to me about the benefits of that hunt as you see it.
Exactly what you said. Finding these big deer, it takes a lot of work. And with as many tags as there are issued in our state, my feeling is when I find a deer that I am interested in harvesting, I really want to have the earliest crack at getting to that deer. And the October hunt really lends itself to that because the deer are still grouped up with other bucks. If they have deer that they hang out with, they're in a pretty stable pattern doing the same thing day in and day out. They might have multiple bedding areas or places that they go that's kind of random, but the general theme behind their habit stays the same that type of year. So for me, really, it's a key time to be able to locate, pattern, relocate, and be sitting there on that first hunt in position to be able to take that deer if that's what you want to do.
Wouldn't you agree that a lot of people that don't have the time to scout like maybe you and I do, wouldn't you think that, sometimes those late November or now they're kind of the first part of December, they have a big general hunt, and then even like the December, what they call the premium tags that, are pre-rut, say the 15th through the end of the month of December. Those are great hunts for guys that don't have time to scout because typically the weather's cooler and they get a little bit more deer activity. Would you agree with that?
I do, for sure.
Yeah.
You talked about the weather. These deer, you can find them from 8,000 feet down to the desert floor. Majority of our tags, I would say, are in the desert. So your conditions, depending on where you fall in the year, definitely dictate the amount of deer movement you're going to see. Those early October hunts, sometimes you're limited to 30 minutes in the morning and evening. of good deer movement. The later you go, obviously, we start getting into December, late November, early December. You might pick up on a little bit of pre-rut activity there. The last couple years, I've really seemed to notice that the rut with these little whitetail seems to get later and later and later. That trophy December tag that I had in college, my first tag down in the desert there by Tucson, I remember going out on the 15th and seeing 3 or 4 bucks that were pretty heavy in with the does on the 15th of December. And as the years have gone by, it seems to me that has really tapered off. Now I don't seem to notice that much activity until you start getting into January, on these southern units around Tucson. But
what if you had to guess why? Why is that? Do you think it's pressure, or do you think it's drought? What do you think the single most important factor for seeing later rutting activity is?
I don't really know. I haven't been able to put my finger on that.
It's one of those things like what we were talking about before. It's one of those mysteries. I kind of know exactly what you're talking about, and talking to a lot of old-timer Coues deer hunters, they would talk about, those December hunts, seeing lots of rutting activity at the beginning of the hunt all the way through, and I wonder if it's drought, and then, I wonder how much of it is pressure, and they just, have gotten chased around so much that maybe once the seasons die down, they actually have a little bit of time to not be looking over their shoulder as much, for hunters, and maybe have a little bit more time to just get after the does and get the rut going. It's hard to say. Going back to what you were saying on the October, and when you would go out and September, early October, when you were scouting for this buck, was the buck more vulnerable to your eye in the morning, or more vulnerable in the evening, or were they, would you say, 50-50 on the sightings?
Once I figured out where he was and what he was doing, I could almost guarantee that I could go in there and see him. The mornings were probably better odds. There was a couple evenings when I sat there and he didn't come out where I could see him in time before it got dark. So probably the mornings were best, and he'd mill around feeding a little bit before he went in for the rest of the day. So better odds were in the morning. He lived on this little knob that he lived on, had a awesome north-facing slope, and then really open south-facing slope. And occasionally he would come out on the south-facing slope and be in the sun for a little while in the mornings, but majority of the time he probably spent 98% of his time on the north side of that little knob there.
I was going to ask you about that, as far as in the amount of times that you saw him. For people that are, listening, that are trying to learn Coues deer behavior and whatnot, during the summer and in those months, September, October, and even into November, when it's still very warm, what percentage of that buck's life would you bet that he spent in the shady areas, and what percentage kind of in the open, in the sunny areas?
On this particular deer?
Yes.
I would say in like a 2-week span, I would see him on that south facing slope one time out of 14 days. So
okay, so you could possibly deduct that either A, a 5-year-old deer, or B, a big deer, or maybe even just Coues deer in general, are going to spend time on those north-facing shady slopes as opposed to looking for them out in the wide open. While you might see one in the wide open, you might be better off glassing into the dense cover and finding those bucks. Would that be safe to say?
I would say on the majority, yes. I mean, there are instances where I found deer that live on south-facing slopes that stay there all the time. It really boggles my mind sometimes where I do actually find some deer. But if you're looking for the big caliber, older age class bucks, I mean, they are sneaky little boogers, and you need to look into the deep, nasty holes and the hidey places and thick slopes, and if they definitely hide.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, absolutely. They have an unbelievable ability to be laying right there, and they're there the whole time, and they can be very difficult to see. If during in that early season, and let's say you watch the buck from sun up to sundown, in your opinion, from what you've observed, how many times would that buck be up and then down, either changing positions for shade or getting up to feed? Or let's actually just start with once they've bedded down. Okay, mm-hmm. So they've done their little 30-minute feed in the morning, and I know moon cycle, I know there's a lot of factors, but just in general, how long would that buck pretty much be down all day?
For me, that's kind of a loaded question, because I have found over the last couple, I mean, just in general, watching whitetail bucks and keeping tabs on them, every single one is really different. The big deer that I killed that we're talking about, he would kind of be up and down a lot of the times in the day. But where I found him was very, very low hunting pressure. It was way, way back in, like 3 miles back into where I actually found him. The buck I killed this last year in 2014, he, on the October hunt, would not be up in the morning at all. You would go glass for an hour or so at first light, and we could never find him. And then he would get up about 9:30 or 10 o'clock and mill around for 10 minutes and then lay back down and be laid down the whole rest of the day. So
and maybe not even get up 30 minutes left of light. He'd be bedded pretty much the whole time.
Yeah.
So he I assume was probably pretty nocturnal. Mm-hmm. And so what I hear you saying is all these deer are different. But I also hear you saying that they do get up and down during the day, but they don't actually move a big distance. They may get up, feed for 2-3 minutes, and then back down, stretch their legs, and then back down. Is that correct?
Yeah. And, if I guess maybe we should change this over a little bit to more, techniques and what it takes to actually find them, because, I mean, your number one tool for finding these deer, obviously, is having some optics and staying behind them all day if you can. I mean, there's, in my opinion, not a bad time to be glassing. If you're trying to find a new deer or you're looking for one that you know about, I mean, the more time you're spending on the glass and the odds, you got to be looking, if they bedded down already and they're pretty much set for the day, you got to be looking right where they're at in that couple, 2 to 15 minute window of when they're going to stand up and maybe turn around, lay back down, or move positions a little bit.
Absolutely. Devin, it's a great point you bring up. Let me ask you about the optics you do use. What do you prefer to use for these deer? Tell me about the lineup of optics that you prefer.
Well, right now I have 2 65 millimeter Swarovski HD spotting scopes mounted together, and I'm using the 25 to 50 variable wide angle eyepieces on them. I would say 90% of the time I'm glassing with them on the 25 power. I had a couple different sets of doctors before I got this Swarovski set up. So, you know, basically the best amount of binocular you can have. I hunted a long time with a pair of just 15s. You know, those are they got so many new optics out now. They have the 12 power Swarovskis, 10s, 15s, big eyes, but the more high quality, better glass you can get, the better off you're going to be, in my opinion.
And I agree with you completely on that. I want to go back a little bit to these twin spotting scopes. Tell me about what actual benefit from a sitting and glassing with those twin spotting scopes. How does that give you a benefit over a 15 power, say, Swarovski binocular?
The major difference in the power on those things is, for me, being able to see through vegetation.
And when you say that, are you looking for ear flicking? Are you looking for black noses? Are you looking for tips of antler?
Yeah, all of the above, anything and everything.
So definition, from an ability to not just look at a hill, you want to be looking into the hill and be able to literally pick up anything that's there that's a Coues deer characteristic.
For sure. So, you know, if you're sitting on a hill and looking across the canyon with a pair of 10 or 12 power binoculars, I mean, you can see all the open spaces on that hillside. You know, I mean, you got it pretty well covered, but back to how sneaky these big giant deer can be, they might not be out walking around when you're looking. So you got to be able to look in the dark, shady holes and under trees, through trees, behind bushes. I mean, the whole kit and caboodle. So those big eyes have really allowed me to just dig and tear stuff apart and find deer that I probably wouldn't have found if I didn't have those.
And while we're on that subject, Devin, walk me through. Let's say you're glassing off a point. This is not a place where you've seen a big deer, but you're prospecting for deer, looking for a big deer. That you don't know a deer's there, but you are looking for a big deer, and you're starting out in its first light. At first light, would you describe your glassing as very slow and meticulous, or are you very quick and really covering the country in the first 15 minutes of light?
For me, when I first sit down somewhere, I generally look at it with my bare eyes, and I'll pick out 3 or 5 different places that look real deery to me. You know, if I broke it up, I'd say, well, that bench over there, that little bowl over there, I kind of break it down and look at it and go, if I was a deer, where would I be? And I tend to pan through those areas relatively quickly. Just looking for the obvious type deer. And then after I kind of go through the spots that look good to me, I try and break it up a little bit. But, I'll quick glance everything that I can see, just looking for the obvious stuff. Not crazy wild fast, but try and catch deer that are in the open and obvious right off the bat. And, I'll probably do that for about an hour or so. And then because, by the time you look in the spots that I think look good to me and you kind of glance over it all good, you got it pretty covered. And then I will just sit there and start from the right edge and down and up and down and up and down and up all the way across everything you can see.
Okay, so once you so what you're saying is you glass in the obvious spots that your eye tells you that look like a deer's there. But then once the morning progresses, you're going to slow way down and you're going to start gridding and really trying to pick apart the whole base of the hill and the whole coverage, everything you can see. And you typically start and go from right to left, or were you just saying that as an example, that from right to left, or do you always go right to left?
Just as an example.
Okay, and then you also said something about up, down, up, down. When you're gridding, I go side to side, side to side, side to side, and then, down, side to side. Do I hear you correct that you are gridding up and down on your sweep when you're sweeping through there?
I do. I tend to go up and down. So I'll go up, move to the left or right, and go down, move to the left or right, go up.
And we're getting detail here, but this is kind of stuff that I think people can learn from. Are you taking, say, a whole north-facing slope and gridding all the way to the bottom, all the way to the top, or do you sometimes break it down into areas?
Kind of just what you feel for the day, but you got to look at the whole hill.
Yeah. I mean, some of these you're going up on these high knobs and you got a ton of country to cover. If you get too methodical, you may not even cover the whole country in a day.
Yeah, that's a big factor with using those big binoculars that I got is, you can see so much country with those that there's days and places where I go and, I might only glass one ridgeline in that country that day because there's so much to look at, you can't cover it all. So, some places it might take 5+ trips in there to actually glass it all one time.
Yeah, absolutely. It just depends on the country you're looking at. Mm-hmm. Let's shift gears a little bit to you've been watching this deer. Walk me into, say, a couple days before into the hunt, and tell me a little bit about how the hunt went down for this 126-inch deer.
Well, my goal and my thought when we find a deer that we like is, I want to be set up first light on opening day to be basically pulling the trigger on that animal. The majority of the hunt for me is actually not when I have a tag. When you have the tag in your pocket, for me, that's 5% of, well, I don't know if you could say it's 5%, but that's a small portion of the actual hunt for me. Finding the deer, figuring them out, where they live, and to be set up right there to kill them the first chance you have is my kind of goal with these little deer. So to the actual hunt with my tag on that October rifle hunt, I actually, because the deer was so far in, I packed in there on Monday, and I set up a little one-man tent across the canyon from where I saw the deer 98% of the time. And, I hid my tent, and I could crawl out of my tent and in 5 steps be to my tripod and looking at that hill where that deer was at. And I watched him all day Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday before the hunt even opened. On Thursday, I actually had him bed down 250 yards across the canyon from me all day there on Thursday. So it was, for me, it was a pretty sure thing that come Friday morning, he was in trouble. And Friday morning, why I didn't really sleep Thursday night. I basically laid there awake all night, and I don't know what time I ended up crawling out of my tent, but it was probably an hour or so before, even first light where you could see anything. And I sat there for a long, long time just trying to actually calm myself down, because I was on cloud 9 just waiting for things to go down. And it finally got light enough to glass, and I glassed the couple spots. He kind of had, even on that one hillside, he had 3 general spots on there where he hung out the most. So I looked in those spots and he wasn't there, and I kind of glassed the hillside real quick and couldn't find him, and I kind of started freaking out, thinking maybe I had camped too close or, what happened. But I knew he had to be there because I had been there for 4 days already. And so I just had to calm myself down, and I started on the upper right corner, and I started gridding the hillside apart, and I got about halfway through the hillside and ended up glassing one of the little bucks that he hung out with all the time, and was looking at that deer, and this big deer's head popped out of the bushes. They were just in some pretty deep brush. And
Devin, how far was the buck? I assume the night before on Thursday night you bedded the buck. How far had he moved from the night, from the last time you saw him till where you picked up the little buck and where he ended up popping out?
They were just straight up from where they had been the evening before. So Thursday evening they were 250 yards straight across from me, and that morning when I found him there, they were 500 yards away. But they were, just straight up from where they were the night before, but clear at the top of that little knob that they were on. So,
but definitely a good lesson for Coues deer hunters in that if you're not seeing the buck and there's not people pressure, and you just need to keep looking because more than likely they're right there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure.
And even if there is some people pressure, I've seen bucks run out of a canyon and, the next day you glass back and he's right back in his home spot. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a good lesson for people to learn and to listen to. And I've seen it hunting with Dar so much, and especially big bucks. It just seems like they're so, if you believe in the pattern and believe in your scouting, you can really hone in on these bucks. Mm-hmm. So you found the buck and moved over. Did you have to move at all, or were you able to shoot him from your position?
Well, I had my gun all benched up already the day before, expecting to find him at first light and shoot him right across the canyon there at a little chip shot. And now he was, 500 yards away and at the top of the hill, so I had to adjust my setup with my rifle a little bit, and I actually had buck fever so bad that
I can imagine.
He, the top of the hill was pretty brushy and some big trees up there, and so I got on him with my gun and was watching him, and he went behind some trees and came out and just kind of walked across. There was 3 openings on the top of that hill, and he walked across the first one and didn't stop, so I didn't shoot, and then he came out in the second one, and it was almost like he knew I was there because he would walk and then stop behind the trees. And then he walked across the second opening and stopped behind the trees. And then he started feeding again, and, his head came out and his neck came out, and I was getting ready to shoot and just waiting for him to take that one more step, and wouldn't you know it, he lifted up his head and just walked across that third opening. And so I didn't shoot at him, and then I got a little bit worried because the whole rest of that knob I couldn't see, but I knew that they were going to be hanging out there from all the time bow hunting him and watching him, so I ended up grabbing my rifle and I ran across that canyon. There was a little saddle between my hill and the hill that he was on, and I ran down through that saddle and up the other side and kind of around the corner without getting into details, but I popped out and looked up the hill where I thought they were going to be, and he was standing there at, I don't know, it was 125 or 130 yards or so, and I knelt down behind my tripod, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. Was he aware that you were there? Was he on to you or no?
No, he didn't have a clue.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so he ended up being 126 and change gross as a 3x3 with eye guards?
Yeah.
Just a beautiful, typical buck. Did he have any extra points at all, or was just perfect, clean, typical?
No, he's a perfect, clean, typical.
That's about as big a 3x3 buck you could possibly shoot.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to top him with that. No cheaters, no nothing. And
what were his twos? Was he like 9 and 7 or 9 and 8? What were his G2s and G3s?
I think they're all a little over 9 inches.
Oh wow, the twos and the threes are over 9 as well.
Uh-huh.
That's beautiful. And so he was probably about 14 inches wide?
15 and an eighth, I think, on the inside.
Beautiful. That's just
with
I remember
19 and 6 on the main beams, I think.
Beautiful.
Crazy mass, he's real heavy and just he took the first place in the 2012 Boone and Crockett Awards period for the typical category.
That's awesome.
So I am tickled to death with it.
That's awesome. And that's your biggest personal deer?
That is my biggest personal buck, yes.
And what are some of the other bucks, just general class? I mean, have you shot a handful of bucks over 100 inches, or what's some of the other bucks you have shot?
I have this big one we've been talking about. I have 2 other bucks that make the all-time Boone and Crockett book. Both of them are around 118 gross inches. One net's 111, the other one 113. I have another 4x4 with eye guards that missed the all-time book by a 1/4 inch. And a handful of really nice 107 to 113 gross type deer that are big giant bucks. My wife's got a velvet buck that she shot with her bow that on the day she killed it was around 119 gross. She's got a handful of other big bucks, and then this one she killed just this last year with her muzzleloader is total gross inches on him is 128 and 3/8, I think, if you just add it up like SCI would. And
goodness, what's his main frame? Is he a typical or a nasty non-typical?
He is a 4x4 with eye guards, and then he has matching forks in both of his G3s.
Oh man! And so you've been around a lot of big bucks. Out of all those bucks you just mentioned, how many of those bucks are bucks that you've seen prior to the season? I don't need an exact number, but on a give me a percentage. Are most all of those bucks scouted out bucks that you knew were there and that you have a plan and you efficiently go after those bucks?
Total out of all of them that we killed? I mean, when I first started hunting, we would.
Well, I'm talking about, some of the better bucks. Are most all of the better bucks, say 105 or better, are most all of those bucks that you have really scouted and had a game plan and worked on killing that specific buck?
The ones that I have killed, I would say, yeah. Okay. The ones that my wife have killed, she always gives me a hard time about,
getting out and scouting for you.
But by the time my tag comes, you killed most of the ones you knew about with yourself or somebody else, and I get the end of the straw there with her. But I don't know. She's got some fantastic luck, and we tend to pull them out of the woodwork when she's hunting. Her that big buck that she just killed, we did not know about that deer until the day I found him.
And did you find him during the season then?
We did. It was the third day of her hunt, and I had a big buck picked out for her, but a guy ended up killing it on the October hunt. So we were going after a different buck. We had spent a couple days looking for him and had some bad weather and stuff just kind of mess us up. And there was a chunk of country that I had always wanted to go look in, and I just hadn't had the time to do it. And that morning I told her I had had enough of looking for the buck that we were after, and ended up going in this new chunk of country. And the third draw that we ended up looking in, that buck was standing there. And it was 9 o'clock in the morning and he was up. I don't know what he was doing, but we came around this little corner and I just looked up the draw with my bare eyes and saw him. And so as much as I'd like to say we had him patterned and knew about him, we didn't. But it goes to finding these big deer. I mean, obviously you got to have a lot of time to put into it. You got to kind of think outside of the box and look in places that are, maybe getting overlooked or don't have a lot of hunting pressure for a couple years. One of the major factors, in my opinion, is just having a knack for where to look. My two closest hunting buddies, they always tell me all the time, well, why did you go look in there? Or, what in the heck were you ever doing over there? And my answer is, I don't know. It just looked good to me, and I went in there and looked. So definitely, the more time you can look, the more places you can look, and, the number one thing is being persistent. Just because you went and glassed somewhere once doesn't mean there's not a big giant buck in there. You might have to go there. For instance, my 2014 buck, I saw him in very early on when he was still in velvet. I just got about a 30-second look at him before he topped over a ridge, and I think we went in there 10 or 12 times before we saw him again, and saw him hard-horned. He had rubbed his velvet. And then we went in there another 3 or 4 times again looking for him and couldn't find him. The next time, so I saw him in velvet. We saw him hard-horned right after the velvet stage. The next time I think we saw him was the day before the hunt started, Thursday before the hunt, and ended up shooting him on Friday. Got lucky, and that buck was one that wasn't like anything else. I mentioned to you before, he at first light was always bedded down, never moved during prime time in the morning. About 9:30 or 10 o'clock he would get up and maybe move beds, and if you didn't know or you weren't looking right where he was at, you dang sure wouldn't see him. So just a sneaky dirty old buck.
Exactly. Sounds like a great buck. And if you had to pick a time other than, say, the first hour and last hour of light, if you had to pick a specific 1 hour time, and I know you and I and the guys that are really into Coues, we glass all day, but if you had to say, I'm going to glass first hour, last hour, and one other hour, when would that be?
For me, it would probably be a even toss-up between like 10, 11, or 1 or 2, or 2 to 3 o'clock, somewhere in there.
It's funny you say that, because I'm the same way. That 10 to 11, I don't know what it is, but it just seems like those bucks always get up around 10 o'clock, 10:30, somewhere in there. Mm. No matter what the moon's doing, no matter what time of year it is, it seems like 10 o'clock, it just seems those deer get up then. So it's very interesting that you say that. We've just scratched the surface here today talking about Coues deer, and I look forward to having you on again, because there's just so much to talk about with these deer, and we've already learned a lot about how you do things and how methodical you are, and you can hear the passion that you have for these deer. Mm-hmm. So I applaud you for that, and I look forward to having you on again to talk about other things, because, we've got moon cycles, we've got, temperature, we've got, rutting, we've got all sorts of stuff to talk about. Thanks for being with us.
Yep. We'll talk to you later.
All right, bye.